There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes with living in a city. You're surrounded by people, millions of them, packed into buildings and subways and coffee shops. And yet, you can go days without a conversation that matters, weeks without someone who actually knows your name. So you fill your space with strangers, roommates found through desperate Craigslist ads and 10-minute coffee shop interviews where you try to assess whether this person will steal your food or let their dishes rot in the sink or have a psychotic break at 3 a.m. You make these calculations quickly. You look for red flags in the span of a handshake. But here's what nobody tells you about sharing your home with a stranger. Sometimes the red flags don't appear until long after you've given them a key. Sometimes they don't appear at all. Sometimes the danger is so patient, so methodical, that by the time you realize what's happening, they already know everything about you. And you know nothing about them. I'm Alvin, and this is Common Ground Horror. I want to be very clear about something before I go any further. I'm not careless. I'm not naive. I'd been living in this city for 4 years. I'd had 3 different roommate situations, and I knew the risks. I knew what to look for. The podcast guy, my previous roommate, had seemed fine at first. Quiet, worked from home, paid on time. Then one night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of him drilling mounting brackets into the living room wall for his studio setup, without asking. When I confronted him, he looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. After that, I changed my criteria. I didn't need a friend. I didn't need someone to split a pizza with or binge Netflix alongside. I needed someone who would pay their share and essentially not exist in my life. When I saw Leo's ad, it felt like the universe correcting course. Geological consultant, overseas work, gone 2 to 3 months at a time, need address for mail and storage, rarely home, willing to pay premium for convenience and location. The amount he was offering was significantly more than half the rent, enough that I actually paused before responding, wondering if it was a scam. We met at a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon. He was exactly what you'd expect from someone who works in geology. Practical, no nonsense, dressed like someone who spends most of their time in the field. Hiking boots that had actually been used for hiking. A watch with about 6 different functions. Firm handshake, direct eye contact. He explained the situation simply. He traveled for work constantly, sometimes to remote locations with no infrastructure. South America, Central Africa, Southeast Asia. He needed a permanent address for tax purposes, somewhere to receive mail, and a place to store his belongings between contracts. He'd be home maybe 1 week every few months, if that. I just need a bed and a closet, he said. I won't be in your way. By the time we finished our coffee, he'd transferred 3 months' rent plus security deposit. He was flying to Ecuador the next morning and wouldn't be back for at least 12 weeks. I'll move my stuff in this afternoon while you're at work, if that's okay, he said. I've got a storage unit I need to clear out and I'd rather just get it done. I gave him the spare key. I never saw him move in. When I came home that evening, his door at the end of the hall was closed, and I could see the faint outline of boxes through the gap at the bottom. That was it. No awkward first night small talk. No negotiating fridge space or shower schedules. It felt like I'd won some kind of roommate lottery. For 2 months, it was exactly what I'd hoped for. The apartment was mine. Quiet, calm, organized according to my own systems. I could walk around in my pajamas at noon on a Saturday. I could leave dishes in the sink overnight without judgment. I could exist without having to perform the constant low-level social theater that comes with cohabitation. Leo's door stayed closed. The rent appeared in our joint account on the 1st of each month, automated, punctual. We exchanged maybe 2 emails total, one where I confirmed the payment had gone through, another where I asked how the project was going out of politeness. His response was brief. Indefinite. Project extended. Hope all is well. I didn't think anything of it. The first time something changed, it was so subtle, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. I have a framed photograph of my sister and me from a trip we took to the coast 3 years ago. It usually sits on the small table near the front door, the same spot it's occupied since I moved in. I see it every time I come home, every time I leave. It's part of my spatial memory, part of the architecture of my daily life. One evening I came home and it was on the bookshelf in the living room. I stood there in my coat, keys still in hand, staring at it. The thing about objects in your own home is that you develop a relationship with them. You know where they belong, and when something is wrong, even slightly, your brain registers it immediately. That brief flicker of cognitive dissonance before your rational mind rushes in to smooth it over. I tried to remember moving it. Had I been cleaning? Dusting? Rearranging? I couldn't recall ever touching it, but I was busy, tired. Work had been brutal. Back-to-back deadline crunches that left me so exhausted, I'd sometimes forget whether I'd eaten dinner. It seemed entirely plausible that I'd moved the photo in some absent-minded moment and simply didn't remember. I put it back on the table by the door and tried not to think about it. A week later, my favorite coffee mug went missing. It's a specific mug, dark blue ceramic with a chipped handle that fits my grip perfectly. I use it every single morning. It's part of my routine. The small rituals that structure your day when you live alone. That morning, it wasn't in the cupboard where it lives. It wasn't in the sink or the dishwasher. I spent 10 minutes searching, increasingly irritated, before I found it. It was in the bathroom, in the sink. I stood there looking at it, my toothbrush in one hand, trying to construct a scenario where I'd brought coffee into the bathroom and just left it there. I couldn't. The memory didn't exist. But again, stress, exhaustion, the kind of autopilot living that comes with working too much and sleeping too little. I washed the mug and put it back. But something shifted in the apartment after that. The quiet that had previously felt calming now felt watchful. The building had always made sounds at night. Old buildings do. The radiators clanked, the pipes groaned, the floorboards settled with the temperature changes. I'd learned the language of those sounds over the years, cataloged them into normal and requires attention. But now each creak seemed deliberate. Each settling sound felt like movement. I started noticing the food. Not in large quantities, nothing obvious enough to be certain. A single apple missing from the bowl on the counter. One slice of cheese gone from a package I'd just opened. A yogurt I was sure I bought that wasn't in the fridge. The kind of discrepancies that make you doubt your own memory. I started paying closer attention. I began doing informal inventory checks, mentally cataloging what was in the fridge each time I closed it. The next day, I found a pull tab from a soda can on the kitchen counter. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't opened that soda. I was certain of it. That was when the true dread began to settle in. Not panic, not fear yet, but that cold, creeping sense that something was fundamentally wrong and I couldn't identify what. Leo's door remained shut at the end of the hall. According to the original timeline, he'd been gone almost 3 months. He should be back soon, or at least checking in. But there had been no communication beyond that one brief email. I thought about messaging him, asking if he'd made a surprise visit back home, if he'd been in the apartment. But what would I say? Did you move my photo and drink my soda? It sounded insane, even in my own head. One evening when I came home from work, I noticed a smell. It was faint enough that I almost walked past it, but something made me stop in the entryway, keys still in hand, and just breathe. Earthy, metallic, slightly damp. The smell of soil and minerals and something organic that had been somewhere dark. It didn't belong in my apartment. I followed it down the hallway, my pulse starting to climb, and stopped outside Leo's door. The smell was stronger here. I pressed my face close to the gap between the door and the frame, breathing in. It was definitely coming from inside his room. Had he left something? Food that had spoiled? Some piece of equipment from his fieldwork that was degrading? But the smell wasn't rot. It wasn't decay. It was fresh earth, like someone had just come in from outside, from digging, from being underground. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the building settle, and that smell seemed to seep under my bedroom door. Faint, but persistent, mixing with the dark. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a sound, soft but deliberate. A scraping, like something being dragged slowly across the hardwood floor in the hallway. I sat bolt upright, my heart slamming against my ribs, straining to hear over the blood pounding in my ears. I watched the thin line of hallway light visible under my bedroom door, waiting for a shadow to pass. No shadow came. The scraping stopped. I sat there in the dark for 20 minutes, barely breathing, before I finally convinced myself it was just the old building. Pipes expanding. The radiator settling. Something normal and explainable. I almost believed it. The next morning I found the footprint. It was on the kitchen tile, just a few feet from Leo's door. A muddy imprint from the front of a boot, the kind with a deep tread designed for traction in rough terrain. Dark, rich soil clung to the grooves. My blood went cold. I crouched down, staring at it. The mud was still slightly damp. Someone had been in the apartment. Recently, possibly last night. The smell, the food, the moved objects, the footprint. All of it coalesced into a single terrible certainty. I was not alone. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over 911, trying to formulate what I would say. There's a muddy footprint in my apartment, and my coffee mug was in the bathroom. I could already hear the response, the barely concealed impatience. Do you have any evidence of forced entry? Is anything missing? No, nothing was missing. Everything was just moved. Wrong. I took a photo of the footprints instead and spent the rest of the day at work unable to focus, jumping every time someone walked past my desk. For the next week, I didn't sleep. Not really. I dozed in fits, snapping awake at every sound, my hand reaching for my phone on the nightstand. I started jamming a chair under my bedroom door handle at night. Not because I thought it would actually stop anyone, but because the scraping sound it would make if someone tried to open the door might give me a few seconds warning. A few seconds to do what? I didn't know. I couldn't tell which thought was more frightening, that I wasn't alone in the apartment, or that I was losing my mind. Both options felt equally plausible, equally terrifying. Then, last Tuesday night, everything changed. I came home from work around 7 p.m., exhausted, keyed up. My nerves scraped raw from a week of hypervigilance. Leo's door was open. Not wide open, just ajar. 6 inches, maybe, enough to see darkness beyond. It hadn't been open in 3 months. I stood frozen in the entryway, my bag still on my shoulder, keys clutched in my fist like a weapon. Leo? My voice sounded thin and strange in the quiet apartment. No answer. Leo, are you home? Nothing. My hands were shaking as I moved down the hallway, each step deliberate, my breathing too loud in my own ears. I pushed the door open further with my foot and felt along the wall for the light switch. The overhead light flickered on. The room was completely empty. Not just empty of Leo, empty of everything. No bed, no dresser, no boxes or belongings. The closet door stood open, revealing bare shelves and vacant hangers. It was as if no one had ever lived there at all. The only thing in the entire room was a single Polaroid photograph taped at eye level on the far wall. I walked across the bare floor, my footsteps echoing in the empty space, and peeled it from the wall. The image made my stomach drop. It was me, sleeping in my own bed, photographed from the foot of the mattress. My face looked pale and ghostly from the camera flash. My expression blank, vulnerable, completely unaware. In the background, just visible in the frame, was the chair I'd been jamming against my bedroom door. I flipped the photograph over with trembling hands. There was a date written in neat handwriting on the back. The night before. Someone had been in my bedroom while I slept. While I thought I was safe behind a locked door with a chair braced against it. My heel caught on something behind me and I stumbled backward, nearly falling. There was a canvas duffel bag on the floor just inside the door, partially hidden in the shadow. I knelt down, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the zipper. Inside were my clothes. Not Leo's belongings. Mine. A sweater I thought I'd lost last month. A pair of jeans I couldn't find last week. A t-shirt I sleep in. All of them tangled together, muddy, with small thorns clinging to the fabric like they'd been dragged through underbrush. Beneath the clothes were photographs, dozens of them, all Polaroids. Me cooking dinner at the stove, unaware. Me sitting on the couch watching TV, my face lit by the screen's glow. Me standing at the bathroom sink brushing my teeth. Me asleep. Different nights. Different angles. My hands moved on autopilot, riffling through them, each image worse than the last. In the side pocket of the duffel bag, I found a small plastic Ziploc bag. Inside were chunks of my hair. Long strands, clearly cut, not shed. And nail clippings. I dropped it like it had burned me. I ran. I didn't grab my wallet, my keys, or my phone charger. I just ran out of that room, out of that apartment, down 4 flights of stairs and into the street. I called the police from a gas station 2 miles away, standing under the fluorescent lights, shaking so hard the attendants asked if I needed an ambulance. When the police arrived at my apartment, they found nothing. Leo's room was empty and clean. No duffel bag, no photographs, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. They checked the locks, no signs of forced entry. They checked the windows, all secure. They took my statement with a kind of professional patience that barely masked their skepticism. The landlord was called. He confirmed that a Leo Marshall had signed a lease, had paid 3 months' rent up front via electronic transfer, and had provided a driver's license and references during the application process. Everything had seemed legitimate. The phone number on file was disconnected. The email bounced back. The driver's license was linked to a P.O. box in a city 3 states away. There was no forwarding address, no emergency contact, no record of employment with any geological consulting firm they could verify. The references he'd provided when the police followed up turned out to be disconnected numbers. Leo, for all intents and purposes, didn't exist. The detective assigned to my case said they'd keep it open, but without physical evidence, without any proof that a crime had occurred. There wasn't much they could do. "You might want to consider changing your locks," he said, "and maybe look into a security system." I didn't change the locks. I left. I moved cities 2 days ago. I won't say where. I paid to break my lease, abandoned most of my belongings, and started over in a place where no one knows my name. I have 3 locks on my front door now, a chain, a deadbolt, and one of those floor-braced security bars that's supposed to be impossible to force. I sleep with the lights on, and every night, without fail, I wake up around 3 a.m. with a distinct, unshakable feeling that someone is standing in my doorway, watching. I never see anyone. I turn on every light. I check the locks. I look under the bed and in the closet like a child afraid of monsters. But the feeling doesn't go away. I thought I'd found the perfect roommate, someone who was never there, someone who existed mostly on paper, made my life easier, and asked for nothing in return. The truth is, he was always there. In my bedroom while I slept, in my kitchen while I cooked, standing in the hallway while I watched TV, just outside the frame, just beyond my awareness. The perfect roommate isn't someone who's never home. It's someone you never notice is there. Until it's too late. If you've lived through a nightmare you can't explain, I want to hear it. Send your stories to commongroundhorror@gmail.com to be featured on the channel. This has been Alvin for Common Ground Horror. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.